History is rarely as clean as a painting makes it seem. In the dead of night, on Christmas of 1776, the American Revolution was not a grand triumph. It was a dying flame, flickering in the sub-zero winds of a Pennsylvania winter. The year is 1851. In a studio far across the Atlantic in Dusseldorf, Germany, a man named Emanuel Leutze is finishing a canvas of monumental proportions. It is nearly 21 feet wide, a window into a moment that changed the world. At first glance, it is a scene of heroic stability. We see George Washington, unshakable as a statue, leading a fragile boat through a river of jagged, crystalline ice. But look closer. This is not a photograph of the past. It is a masterpiece of political stagecraft. It is a beautiful lie. Almost every detail of the flag, the boat, the light, and even Washington's posture is historically impossible. Yet, for nearly 2 centuries, this image has stood as the definitive soul of a nation. Why? Why did a German immigrant choose to paint a wrong history to tell a greater truth? Today, we peel back the layers of pigment and propaganda. We step out of the museum and onto the freezing currents of the Delaware. We aren't just looking at a river crossing. We are witnessing the birth of an icon, the math of courage, and the moment where art decided to save a revolution. Welcome to Imago Historiae. To understand this canvas, we must look at the hand that held the brush. Emanuel Leutze was a man caught between 2 worlds. Though he grew up in America, he returned to Germany as an adult, only to find his homeland suffocating under the weight of monarchy. By 1848, Europe was burning with its own revolutions. Leutze didn't just paint for the American public. He painted for the German people. He wanted to show them that a desperate, cold, and divided people could cross their own Delaware. He was using American history as a mirror to reflect European hope. Imagine the irony. One of the most American paintings in existence was created in a German studio. Leutze used American art students as his models for the soldiers. He didn't have the Delaware River to look at, so he looked at the Rhine. This distance gave him a unique power. He wasn't restricted by the messy, dark reality of that night in 1776. Instead, he could paint the legend. He was a storyteller first, and a historian second. For Leutze, the accuracy of the uniform was secondary to the accuracy of the spirit. When Leutze began his work, the United States was also beginning to fracture over the issue of slavery. The nation was drifting toward its own civil war. By painting this scene of unity of a diverse group of men pulling together toward a common goal, Leutze was sending a message back across the ocean. Do not let this fire go out. He was turning the canvas into a political manifesto. He chose a moment of absolute desperation because he knew that courage isn't found in victory. It is found in the decision to move forward when the water is freezing and the night is at its darkest. Look closely at the architecture of this image. Just as Jacques-Louis David used the stable lines of a Greek frieze, Leutze organizes his chaos into a powerful, upward-pointing triangle. At the base of this pyramid are the common men, the rowers, struggling against the jagged blocks of ice. But your eyes are pulled upward, following the diagonal lines of the oars and the flag, until they rest on the apex, Washington's head. This is pyramidal composition. It creates a sense of absolute stability in a world that is literally tilting. While the boat rocks and the water churns, Washington remains the unshakable center. He is the anchor. He is the only vertical line in a world of horizontal danger. Now, let us examine Washington himself. Much like David's idealized Socrates, Leutze's Washington is a statue brought to life. History tells us the crossing happened in a blinding sleet storm, in the pitch black of night. Washington would have been huddled in a heavy cloak, soaked and shivering. But here, he stands. His chest is out, his gaze is fixed on the invisible shore, and his stance is impossibly balanced on the edge of a moving vessel. This is not the anatomy of a tired general, it is the anatomy of fate. By placing him at the prow, leaning forward into the wind, Leutze suggests that Washington isn't just on the boat, he is the force pulling it forward. He is the physical embodiment of the Enlightenment's great man theory. This is not the anatomy of a tired general, it is the anatomy of fate. By placing him at the prow, leaning forward into the wind, Leutze suggests that Washington isn't just on the boat, he is the force pulling it forward. He is the physical embodiment of the Enlightenment's great man theory. Observe the sky. While the crossing happened at night, Leutze paints the atmosphere of a breaking dawn. The light does not come from a candle or a lantern. It comes from the upper left, a cold, celestial glow that hits the white stars of the flag and the pale face of the general. In the world of 19th century Romanticism, this is divine providence. The light represents the morning of America. Notice how it glints off the edges of the ice, turning the obstacles of the river into jewels. Leutze is telling us that the storm isn't something to fear. It is the stage upon which a new era is being born. The darkness behind the boat is the past. The light at the prow is the future. Finally, notice the rhythm of the rowers. Their bodies are a mess of angles, arms straining, backs bent, heads tucked against the cold. This serves a dual purpose. First, it emphasizes the sheer physical labor required to achieve liberty. Second, it creates a visual vibration around Washington. Because everyone else is in motion, Washington's stillness becomes even more magnetic. He is the silence at the center of the storm. The rowers provide the pathos, the human struggle, while Washington provides the logos, the divine reason. It is a masterclass in visual hierarchy, ensuring that even if you look at this painting for only a second, you know exactly who is in charge of destiny. Look closely at the men pulling the oars. This is not just a collection of soldiers, it is a meticulously crafted micro-society. In the front, we see a man in a Scots-Irish bonnet. Beside him, a figure in a green tunic of a frontiersman. In the middle, a man wearing a raccoon skin cap, and most strikingly, a man of African descent, often identified in lore as Prince Whipple. Leutze is making a radical statement here, much like David's inclusion of the diverse disciples in Socrates' cell. He is telling us that the American Revolution wasn't won by an elite guard, but by a mosaic of humanity. By placing these diverse faces in the same fragile vessel, Leutze suggests that democracy is a collective labor where every hand, regardless of origin, must pull against the same ice. Now let's address the most famous error in the painting, the flag. The stars and stripes we see here did not exist in December 1776. It wouldn't be adopted for another year. At the actual crossing, they likely carried a much simpler banner, or none at all, in the darkness. But for Leutze, accuracy was a secondary concern. The flag is the vertical soul of the composition. It catches the light of the coming dawn, acting as a visual lightning rod. It connects the struggling men in the boat to the heavens above. It is an anachronism of purpose, a symbol of the nation they were becoming, rather than the army they were at that frozen moment. Notice the young man gripping the flagpole, his face filled with grim determination. This is a young James Monroe, the future 5th President of the United States. While Monroe was indeed at the Battle of Trenton, he wasn't in Washington's boat. So why put him there? This is Leutze's nod to the lineage of leadership. By placing a future president in the shadow of the first, he creates a bridge across time. It tells the viewer that the struggle of 1776 wasn't a one-time event, but a torch being passed. In the language of art, this is hagiography, the painting of saints. Leutze isn't just recording a crossing, he is building a secular altar. Finally, look at the water. The ice in the Delaware that night was mushy and slushy, dangerous, but not the giant, jagged cakes of ice we see here. Leutze chose to paint the ice like broken glass. Why? Because it heightens the tactile tension of the scene. You can almost hear the grinding of the wood against the frozen shards. These ice blocks represent the friction of history. Every inch of progress is a battle. In your own life, when you face a Delaware, the obstacles aren't soft. They are sharp and heavy. By exaggerating the ice, Leutze makes Washington's stillness even more miraculous. To be calm when the very water is trying to tear your ship apart, that is the ultimate definition of stoicism. To understand this painting, we must understand the crime of 1776. Just as Socrates was charged with corrupting the youth, Washington and his men were charged with the greatest sin of the 18th century, high treason. As they crossed this river, they weren't just soldiers. They were dead men rowing. If they failed, there would be no trials, only gallows. The British Crown viewed these men not as patriots, but as a chaotic contagion that needed to be erased. This is the weight you see in Washington's eyes. He isn't just looking at the shore, he is looking at the edge of an executioner's axe. Why did they cross? It wasn't for glory. It was for survival. The Continental Army was disintegrating. Enlistments were set to expire in 6 days. Washington knew that if he didn't strike a blow at Trenton, the revolution would simply vanish. This is the Socratic choice. Socrates had the chance to run, but he chose the hemlock to save his philosophy. Washington had the chance to retreat, but he chose the river to save his republic. This isn't a tactical maneuver, it is a leap of faith. Leutze captures the moment between the decision and the result, the pure, agonizing tension of the gamble. Notice the contrast in energy. The disciples in Socrates' cell were drowning in grief, pathos. The rowers in this boat are drowning in exhaustion. But Washington represents the active will. In Stoic philosophy, you cannot control the storm, but you can control your response to it. By standing tall while others huddle, Washington is becoming the victory before it even happens. He is the only one in the frame who has already accepted the possibility of death. And in that acceptance, he finds a terrifying magnetic power. He is directing his own final act, refusing to be a victim of the ice. There is a silent contract happening here. Look at the men behind Washington. They aren't looking at the ice. They are looking at him. They follow him because he is the first to face the wind. This is the essence of the social contract in a time of war. They give him their lives, and in return, he gives them a vision of a future that hasn't happened yet. Leutze paints this relationship as a sacred bond. If Washington waves, the boat sinks. If he stands, the nation rises. It is a reminder to the viewers of 1851 and to us today that leadership is not about orders, but about who has the courage to stare into the storm the longest. If Washington is the mind of this painting, these men are its muscle. Look at the two figures at the very front of the boat. Their backs are turned to us, their muscles strained to the point of snapping. Unlike the disciples in Socrates' cell, who were paralyzed by pathos, these men are defined by action. They don't have the luxury of looking at the invisible truth in the sky. They must look at the violent reality of the river. Leutze paints them with a raw, gritty texture. You can almost feel the frostbite on their knuckles. They represent the anonymous labor of history, the millions of unnamed people who actually carry the weight of a leader's vision. At the rear, we see the man tasked with steering. His face is tucked into his coat, his body angled sharply against the current. He is the counterweight to Washington. While the general looks forward with calm certainty, this man is battling the forces that try to pull the boat backward. He represents the shame and fear that every revolution must overcome. In the Socrates script, we saw a guard who couldn't look at the philosopher. Here we see a soldier who cannot look at the storm. He simply endures. He is the embodiment of endurance over heroism. There is a figure near the center who often goes unnoticed. He is slumped, his hat pulled low, appearing sick or exhausted. This is Leutze's nod to the cost of the crossing. Not everyone in this boat is a titan. Some are broken, some are dying. By including this vulnerable figure, Leutze avoids making this a purely hollow propaganda piece. He shows us that the revolutionary contract is a heavy burden. To follow a leader into the ice is to risk everything, including your health and your sanity. He is the human curtain that reminds us this wasn't a parade, it was a desperate escape from extinction. Notice the body language. Just as Socrates was the only open figure in his cell, Washington is the only expansive figure here. The men around him are closed. Their arms are tucked in, their heads are down, their bodies are curled into balls to save heat. They are trapped in their mortal suffering. Washington alone defies the cold. His posture is open, his chest is exposed to the wind. Leutze is showing us the ultimate goal of the revolutionary will, to reach a state where your purpose makes you immune to your environment. They are the shadows of the struggle. He is the sun of the result. When this painting was unveiled in New York, it was a sensation. Over 50,000 people came to see it. In 1851, America was a powder keg, much like France in 1787. The North and South were pulling apart. Leutze's masterpiece wasn't just a history lesson, it was a blueprint for survival. It reminded a fracturing nation that they once crossed the ice together. It became a prophecy that no matter how thick the ice of discord becomes, the imago of unity must prevail. Emanuel Leutze, like Jacques-Louis David, knew that flesh dies but the image remains. He didn't just paint a general, he painted a spirit. He succeeded in making Delaware a universal metaphor. Today, we don't remember the exact temperature of the water or the type of boat used. We remember the feeling of standing at the prow. Leutze became the new old chronicler, telling a story for a world that would never see the 18th century with its own eyes. So, we return to our question. Is this a painting of a crossing or a painting of a choice? Washington crossed so that the idea of America could live. Today, in a world that is often just as loud, just as cold, and just as divided, this canvas stands as a silent mirror. It asks us, what is our Delaware? What is the ice in our own lives that we are too afraid to push through? Are we huddled in the middle of the boat, shivering in fear? Or can we find the strength to stand at the prow? Thank you for joining us on the freezing currents of the Delaware today. If this journey through the canvas moved you, consider subscribing to Imago Historiae, where we continue to peel back the layers of time, one masterpiece at a time. History is not just behind us, it is within us, waiting to be seen. Until the next frame. Goodbye.